Desde un punto de vista biológico,
From a biological point of view, water and life are synonymous.
es por eso
That is why when there are millions of human beings who do not have access to water, in practice they do not have access to life.
a la vida. Hoy día,
Today, practically a quarter of humanity is in water stress. That is, with serious complications in obtaining the vital liquid that allows life, essentially drinking water.
el vital líquido que permite la vida, el agua fundamentalmente potable. De cualquier manera, es impensable
In any case, it is unthinkable or unsustainable, yes, unsustainable is the right word, that some people only see water as a means to profit, and more profit, without considering the impact on communities, towns, and nations.
lo que significan las comunidades, los pueblos, las naciones.
There are instances where water has been privatized, leading to significant movements, such as the protest in Cochabamba, Bolivia in 2000, where people rallied against privatization.
Contra la privatización.
Water scarcity is prompting social mobilization among European farmers, particularly those from Spain, Portugal, and France.
Franceses a la movilización social. La OTAN 2015 realiza un ejercicio militar
In 2015, NATO conducted a significant military exercise simulating a confrontation with enemy powers over water resources.
agua. Por otro lado, existe hambre.
Meanwhile, hunger persists due to failed crops as the water supply has been contaminated.
Contaminada, ya que el agua ha sido usada en cultivos industriales
This contamination stems from its use in industrial farming, which often prioritizes the profits of a few monopolistic international groups over the actual needs of the people.
grupos imperialistas.
What Gaza truly needs is fresh, drinkable water.
Dulce, potable. Un pueblo que está haciendo
A nation who is drowning without water in thirst and in bombings. But it's the thirst that stands out.
el agua como un elemento que
Water has become an element of death. That is to say, denying water is denying life. And this is what the Zionist entity is doing in Palestine. There have been wars over water, conflicts surrounding it, particularly in West Asia, where such battles have been fought for over 4,500 years.
guerras por el agua. El agua, desde un punto biológico, decíamos al inicio,
From a biological perspective, as I mentioned in the beginning, water is synonymous with life. Yet it is denied to many communities. Migration occurs as a result of the inability to sustain agriculture and industries that rely on water. Everything seems to be driven by profit, with some prioritizing financial gain above all else.
todo está hecho pensando en la ganancia, o algunos lo hacen pensando en la ganancia. Hay algunos que invierten
Some individuals invest in technology to ensure that water is used more effectively. This is a crucial need, to harness technology to combat desertification and restore the natural cycle of water.
de desertificación y poder avanzar nuevamente a que el agua siga
We want to see water flowing freely and undergoing its normal transformations, rather than being disrupted as it is today.
natural y no interrumpida como es hoy día. De cualquier manera,
The struggle for water is deeply connected to the fight for a better quality of life, for an improved society, and against imperial powers that seek to monopolize it and turn it into a profit-driven business, just like everything else they touch.
en un negocio como todo lo que ellos tocan. Esto es negro.
This is Black and White. I'm Eduardo Artes.
Soy Eduardo Artés. En forma intermitente,
From time to time, some mainstream media outlets discuss the water crisis, but they often fail to address the key factors behind it, who is affected, who benefits from it, and the potential for social and military conflicts. It's important to consider who stands to gain from the water crisis and who suffers as a result. To delve deeper into this topic, we have a special guest today, Lucia Sepulveda, a journalist from the University of Chile and currently based in Finland, has been part of the team at Punto Final, a well-known magazine in Chile that has played a significant role in fostering a critical culture. She is an editor and author with expertise in environmental issues, human rights, and nature. Additionally, she is a member of the Movement for Water and Territories, as well as the organization Chile is Better Off Without Free Trade Agreements. Welcome, Lucia Sepulveda, to our program Black and White.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the invitation.
Lucia,
Lucia, can you explain what the water crisis is and what causes it? How serious is it becoming these days? Is the crisis really happening?
¿existe la crisis?
Bueno, si estuviéramos...
If we were to talk to people living in the affected areas, they would definitely say that the issue exists. The real question is, what are the underlying causes? This is where their views will differ significantly from the official analysis provided by the United Nations and mainstream media, as you rightly pointed out. In other words, there's a lot of discussion about this topic, but it often comes from those who hold the reins of power. The solution they propose for the very real crisis at hand do not necessarily benefit the communities and countries that are most impacted. Furthermore, the reasons they attribute to this water crisis do not align with what is clear to those of us who understand the societal model we're living in, the nature of capitalism, the ongoing neoliberalism. These factors contribute to what some refer to as water stress, which many link to climate change, but the root cause is primarily human action. Not just any human action, but that of business leaders across various sectors in various countries. In addition to that, when we think about environmental resources, we often view land resources merely as objects for exploitation rather than as ecosystems. This perspective is crucial because it transcends just the business mindset. It reflects the prevailing paradigm. Water is often seen as a commodity for agriculture, mining, and fulfilling the human right to access it. But in reality, water is so much more than that. Water is essential to life. We are made of water, and without it, just like without air, we cannot survive. Therefore, water should not be viewed in isolation. It's an integral part of an ecosystem and is deeply interconnected with various aspects of life. Consequently, it should be regarded as inseparable from both humans and other living beings on the planet.
Inseparablemente de los seres humanos y de los otros seres vivos del planeta.
Sí, debe ser mirada, dices tú, inseparablemente, sin duda.
Yes, it must be viewed, as you say, inseparably and undoubtedly. What is done to nature, as Federico Engel mentioned, is done to humanity. Exactly. So what is done to water? And as you rightly pointed out, since we are made of water, we're doing it to ourselves. However, it's not just humanity in general. It's a social and economic system. We can even trace back over 4,000 years to find wars in Western Asia fought over water. Nowadays, this topic is still relevant, with discussions about conflicts, including military ones. NATO has even conducted exercises simulating battles with fictional countries over water issues. This highlights that water is at the heart of international conflict. What are your thoughts on this? It certainly impacts us all.
Certainly. There was a prediction made several decades ago stating that the future wars would be fought over water. Just as we often remain unaware of the true reasons behind wars and military occupations, the same will likely apply to conflicts over water. In other words, while the headlines may not reveal it, any invasion that occurs will likely be linked to countries with scarce water resources. Some continents are fortunate enough to be rich in water reserves, while others, despite being considered developed, face significant shortages. To sustain their current levels of consumption and lifestyle, these nations will need to ensure a consistent supply of water. It's important to remember that, like all common resources, water is not infinite. Upon your invitation, I took some time to look into the latest official figures. First, let's make a note that we should always refer to the official data from the United Nations agencies and the academics. However, it is important to remember that there is a bias present, as we mentioned earlier, which is the business bias.
Lucia, before you share the number, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with that figure in just a few seconds. Thank you.
Estamos de regreso aquí en Negro y
We're
Blanco.
back here on Black and White with Lucia Sepulveda, who was about to reveal an intriguing figure related to her presentation. Lucia, please go ahead.
Lucía, por favor, adelante.
Claro, mira, la NASA norteamericana.
Sure. Well, look, the American NASA has recently released data collected from a satellite project orbiting Earth, which is a collaboration with Germany. The satellites are part of the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment known as GRACE. By analyzing gravity data, they can determine how changes in gravity affect the amount of water available on our planet. They found that in about 13 years, between 2015 to 2023, there's been a loss of 1,200 cubic kilometers of stored water compared to the previous decade from 2002 to 2014. To put things into perspective, this loss is equivalent to losing 2.5 times the volume of Lake Erie, one of North America's largest lakes. This highlights the serious state of our water crisis. As these measurements are quite accurate thanks to advanced technology, which excels in diagnostics and measurements, even if it's not so much helpful when it comes to solutions. So it's clear that the global water crisis cannot be ignored.
No se puede negar la crisis hídrica mundial.
How can we address the issue you mentioned regarding that significant crisis that you mentioned? For instance, the former General Commander of Southern Command has suggested that certain natural resources, such as copper, lithium, and water, are crucial for the security of Latin America. This is especially true for countries like Chile and Argentina, as these resources are also considered vital to the national security of the United States.
Claro, ese es el enfoque, el intolerable, diría yo, enfoque.
Certainly. That approach is quite unacceptable. I would say, as they seem to think they own the countries in the global south and those they have previously colonized. It's important to consider the various uses of water. Officially, since you mentioned copper and lithium, official figures indicate that agriculture accounts for the largest share of water usage, around 70%, and in some countries it can be even higher. However, it's misleading to simply refer to it as agriculture. It's really about agribusiness, monocultures, and the large-scale exports of soy, avocado, wine, and so on, which leave the country without tariffs. These exports take the water with them, all thanks to a free trade agreement and the WTO, which impose regulations that force countries to lower their barriers to benefit large producers. The agribusiness sector, particularly agro-industry, stands out as the primary beneficiary of this crisis. They continue to operate in the same manner, expanding their monocultures and inducing changes in the global diet. For instance, there were countries that were previously unfamiliar with avocados or cherries. In the past, people were accustomed to eating certain foods during specific seasons, but now there's a push for comparative advantages from countries that can supply these products. Peasants, especially women peasants in the northern regions, work hard to ensure that wealthier individuals in the north can have for breakfast the foods that cannot be produced in their countries during certain times of the year. Okay, now who comes after agriculture next? It is the industry which includes mining, forestry, salmon farming, fishing, and so on. These sectors account for about 20% of the total. In contrast, human consumption is quite low, around 10 to 12%, which includes health companies that distribute water and rural drinking water. This is a minor portion. So, where should the focus be to address this serious water crisis and the situation of water scarcity? There are somewhat conflicting figures. Some say that 1/3 and others claim 25% of the world's population is experiencing water stress. For some, this is temporary, like during hot months, while others face a constant lack of water throughout the year, relying on water deliveries or having to find it themselves or even migrate.
Perdona, te
No,
interrumpí,
si
pero
yo te iba a preguntar justamente eso.
I was actually going to ask you the same thing. Who benefits from this? Who profits? And who ends up suffering? It's important to clarify that this isn't something that affects everyone equally. There are definitely some who gain from it, right?
Alguien gana con esto, una parte de la moneda.
ellos hablan de que van a hacer, ¿cierto?, la transición energética.
They talk about making an energy transition and decarbonizing to address the significant issue of climate change. However, they need to implement a series of changes and transitions. They will not abandon extractivism. They continue production without altering their capitalist and extractivist models. Especially, it involves extracting natural resources from the global south or less developed countries, often paying low wages and frequently disregarding local regulations while taking advantage of these situations.
And polluting.
And by polluting, of course. And they are the ones who will benefit from this situation. Since they consume a lot of water and energy, they aim to decarbonize, which means transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. However, their focus isn't on ensuring that we have access to affordable, clean and healthy energy.
Barata y limpia y sana.
Por ejemplo, en Chile hay un proyecto que se llama el hidrógeno verde.
In Chile, there is a project known as green hydrogen. This green hydrogen requires high-quality water, almost pristine and free from any contamination. Additionally, it needs renewable energy sources, which is why it's called green hydrogen. However, this initiative primarily benefits northern Germany, where major companies seek non-polluting energy. In the process, we are left with depleted water resources, putting us in a dire and polluted situation. So these ventures that appear to be environmentally friendly might actually be something quite different.
Tan ecológicos, ¿no? Pareciera ser que son otra cosa.
No, esa es, como te decía,
No, as I mentioned, this energy transition isn't truly fundamental. It's more of a preliminary phase, a short transition, if you will. It falls short of its goals because it will disrupt ecosystems due to the significant amount of water required. Sometimes they use desalination plants for the water needed for green hydrogen, but this process also impacts ecosystems. Additionally, they need to establish transportation networks. Just think about the pollution from shipping it from Punta Arenas to Germany. The ships contribute to contamination using ammonia and many other harmful materials in the process. So calling this green is really just a marketing ploy, a misleading narrative that serves the interest of large multinational monopolies, particularly the German automotive industry, which is currently facing challenges and needs to find new ways to produce and sell their products.
poder vender su mercadería, su mercancía de otra manera.
El agua potable es un derecho humano, es un derecho.
Access to clean drinking water is a fundamental human right. What do you think about the fact that it has become a weapon of war today, particularly for the Gazans at the hands of the Zionist entity? They're being denied this essential resource, even in the West Bank. Many are forced to consume contaminated water, and they have no access to safe drinking water. What are your thoughts on using such a vital resource as a tool for oppression, genocide, and extermination?
De sometimiento, de genocidio, de exterminio.
La prensa hegemónica ha ocultado, así como otras aristas de esta guerra.
The mainstream media has largely overlooked, along with many other aspects of this conflict, the critical issue of water usage and the violation of the basic human right to access water and sanitation for the Palestinian population. This is part of genocide. It's a very clear tactic and weapon of genocide, yet it hasn't been highlighted. Many people are unaware of this reality. We see heartbreaking images of children searching for water and food, waiting for assistance, but they aren't even being provided with water. Additionally, the bombings have destroyed agricultural lands and underground water sources. Look, all these official reports I've been going through for this interview discuss the conflict so lightly. They don't even refer to them as wars. They fail to capture the real consequences for the communities, for women, for children, and for the population as a whole. Yet it's always those who are least involved in the conflict, like families and women, who feel the impact the most.
It's always the communities that suffer the most, while others profit. Isn't that right? Lucia, we're nearing the end now. Time has flown by so quickly. Today's conversation has been really great, and we truly appreciate you being here with us on Black and White.
Remember that the International Day of Water is coming up. It's a global event in March, and we'll be there discussing these important topics.
We will all be there answering the call to stand up for water as a human right and to protect those who defend it. Sadly, some of these water defenders have even lost their lives. Thank you, Lucia, for being with us here on Black and White.